Hey, welcome back. Today we're talking about how to buy a multifamily property with no money down by unlocking creative financing and partnerships. Are you keen to get going in the multifamily space and buy your first apartment building, but you're short on cash for doing it? Well, stay tuned with this series of videos. We're going to go over exactly how to buy a multifamily property with no money down, at least none of your own money. And in today's episode, we're going to really focus on unlocking creative financing and partnerships. This is a great way for you to get into multifamily properties without having to save up tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars to do it. Stay tuned. So the first thing we want to look at is the art of creative financing. What does creative financing mean? Well, there's all sorts of different things that you can do when it comes to getting into real properties without having to come up with a lot of cash. So way back in the day when I was doing single family home deals, which also applies to multifamily properties, you can get into properties different ways. You can look at doing a lease with an option to purchase the property at a future date. That could be a great way to get going. And with a small multifamily property, you might be able to do that as well. We can be looking at seller financing type deals where the seller takes on the role as the bank and provides the financing for you, so you don't have to get qualified and you might not even have to come up with very much money for a down payment. Or we can look at buying properties subject to the underlying financing. And depending on when you're watching this video, that could be very appealing, because if somebody has very inexpensive financing already in place, that's a big advantage for you to take that over instead of getting the whole property refinanced. So we'll take a little look into seller financing in more detail in just a few minutes. All right, the next thing we can take a look at is the power of partnerships and joint ventures. What are partnerships? What are joint ventures? Well, basically joint ventures are a form of partnership when it comes to doing a multifamily property. And that means that you get a group of people together and each person brings a different skill set or a different value to the table, and together you all actively work on that deal, right? So it could be that you come on board as the deal finder, you're the marketer, you're the one that went out and shook the trees and found the motivated sellers and tied up the deal and got everything going. Somebody else could be coming on board in the financing department, underwriting department. Somebody else could be coming on board with construction and renovations. Another person could be coming on board with management, etc. You all come together, you share your resources, share your knowledge, share your experience, and do the deal together. That's the typical kind of joint venture. There are certain joint ventures where you bring somebody on board and their primary purpose is to bring on the capital, bring the money, and perhaps some of the qualification for the financing, and that's the main part of their job. That's a possibility as well. So there are different ways that you can do that with partnerships. So the good news is, if you're bringing a skill to the table, it doesn't necessarily need to be the capital skill, you can still participate and be part of that deal. Next thing we can take a look at are private lenders. So these are folks who typically you bring on board who are getting not necessarily equity stake in the property, but they are loaning you money in exchange for a specific rate of return. So they are a private lender. The good news is, depending on your negotiation skills and how well you know the people and what kind of deal you're getting, you can literally get people to finance 100% of the purchase of the property, or at least 100% of the money required for down payments and closing costs and renovations, which means you don't have to bring any of your own money into that deal. So you bring on private lenders instead of coming out of pocket yourself. Now, why would they do this? Because they get all of the benefits and security, in many cases, of real estate without having to do the work themselves, and they're just looking for a consistent return on their investment. And last but not least, we can take a little bit more of a look at seller financing. So this is where you find somebody who wants to sell a multifamily property, whether that's a duplex, whether that's a fourplex, whether that's a 16 unit, 24 unit, whatever size building. Typically, they're probably going to be smaller buildings, owner-operated type situations, mom and pop type situations, where you can negotiate that instead of the seller getting a big chunk of cash all at once, that they might be getting a very hefty tax bill on if they liquidate that way, that they take the position of the bank, and you come up with a small down payment, probably with a joint venture partner or with a private lender, and the seller holds the mortgage. So the seller is the bank. So why would a seller want to do this? Well, if they don't need their 500 grand or their $1 million right up front and they're looking for cash flow instead, but they'd rather not deal with the tenants and the toilets and the ownership, then they can be the bank. They have the security of being the first mortgage on title of that property. So just like the bank, they're very, very well secured, and they don't have to worry about getting that huge tax bill all in one fell swoop. They're getting their money over time. They're getting a nice chunk of cash every single month, which funds their retirement. So a lot of sellers really like that idea, especially if you're good at explaining it and good at negotiating that. That is a good option for a lot of folks. So really consider trying to get seller financing wherever possible. And these typically work, like I said, better if you're dealing directly with the seller, not going through a broker, not going through an agent. If you work directly with the seller, quite often you can actually make that happen. So here's a great example of this. One of our clients, Harry, he did a very good job of finding an off-market deal in a tertiary market outside of a big town in Alberta, and he was able to work directly with the seller. And this property had been owner managed or owner mismanaged for quite a number of years, and it needed a lot of work. So Harry was able to talk with the owner, create a creative seller financing type deal where the seller was the bank. I think Harry had to come up with some investor money to do renovations. I don't think he even had to come up with a down payment because he was going to be making improvements on that property. So he got into it without having to qualify with the bank, without having to jump through all the hoops with lenders and whatnot. He got the property, fixed it up, increased the value, created a win-win-win for the seller, because the seller was able to get all of the benefits of the cash flow from this property by being the bank, and the value of the property increased a lot because Harry fixed it up. So the actual mortgage amount compared to the after repaired value was a lot lower than what it was originally. And then Harry won because he was able to get into this at a decent interest rate without having to jump through all those hoops, and he was able to get into his first multifamily deal very, very creatively. If you find them, you can definitely do them. All right, do you like the idea of bringing on joint venture partners or finding private lenders? Well, if you do, then you're going to love this book. It's called The Money Partner Formula. It goes over my entire process for attracting investors to you instead of you chasing after them. You can grab a free copy at investorattractionbook.com or click on the link in the description below.